Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is Rabia Mahmood and welcome back to lecture number 18. In this lecture today we are going to look once again at the morphosyntactic changes that were taking place in early modern English period. Morphosyntactic changes are going to look at some new dimensions of grammar as well as the word structures that were present in English. Actually, morphosyntactic, this word is a combination of two things, two words. One is morpho, the other is syntactic. Morpho word, it has been derived from morpheme, or what we call it, for morphemes, you know that morpheme is the smallest minimal unit of a word. Morpho is the smallest minimal unit of a word. So it means in morpho we are looking at the word constructions, at different morphemes, that how different morphemes are combining with each other to make new words. Then moving on to the syntactic word, actually morpho refers to words or the smallest meaningful unit of word. Syntactic, it refers to grammar. Grammar is actually the syntactic is the grammatical component of a sentence. Morphosyntactic changes, the changes that were coming on in the English at the level of words and then at the level of grammar. Grammar is about the sentence structure where different words are combined in some specific restricted framework to make or to produce some meaningful units. Morphosyntactics, the words and the grammar, we will be looking at the words, the individual words, or even within the words the individual units of the words that are morpheme, and then from morphemes we'll be moving on to the syntax or the syntactical changes in the language. Syntactical changes are the grammatical changes that are taking place, and a defined grammar that grammar is a set constructed framework of the different combinations of language. So morphosyntactical changes, in this lecture we are going to look in detail at the changes that have taken place at these two levels only. Morphosyntactic changes, Old English had extensive inflectional morphology and relatively flexible word order. When we look at the Old English period, from where English started, it had extensive inflectional morphology. Morphology is about the word formation. In the Old English period, in morphology, there were so many inflections that were used for the formation of the words, and whereas while we come to the word order, the order in which words were placed, it was quite relatively flexible. There are the two features of Old English period. The third feature is that Old English period is full of, number one, inflectional morphology, so many morphemes, so many inflectional morphemes that make up word, and the second is relatively flexible word order. Relatively flexible word order, the word order in which they are combining and making up the sentences, it is quite flexible one. But when the language was progressing or language was decaying, when we come to Middle English period, it had very little inflectional morphology and rather a rigid word order. See, the things are changing. Inflectional morphology was there, but in Old English there were so many inflections. In the Middle English they had inflections, but they were very much little. They were less in numbers, and a rather rigid word order was there. Rigid word order, a very strict word order was there in that period of time. Yes. Then we come to inversions in the present day English. Let's see that how different inversions have taken place in the present day English. The first one inversion is that of negative inversions. Under no circumstances would I do that. Negatively, where the negatives have got some inversions in today's English. Why are we talking about present day English? Because previously we have first talked about the old English period, and then the Middle English, and then the negative inversions that are present in that era. Negative inversions, under no circumstances would I do that. Under no circumstances. No circumstances is a negative inversion. Then locative inversion is what? Behind the barn stood an old oak tree. Behind the barn stood an old oak tree. It's a locative inversion, where actually the negative inversion, it talks more about the negatives that are used within a sentence, and locative inversions are those inversions that talk more about the locations of or the locality. For example, behind the bar stood an old oak tree. Behind the bar is a locative inversion that is found in today's English. The rise of the dummy auxiliary do. In the negative sentences, there was a rise of the dummy auxiliary verb do. Why we say that there was a rise of the word dummy auxiliary word do? The do has been regarded as dummy because perhaps at some times it does not, it is just working as a dummy thing. It is just working as something that is only a statue, where it does not perform any functional role in the language. So the rise of dummy auxiliaries do, let's see that how did they rise and what were their functions. There are some negative sentences that have this do. For example, I haven't eaten yet. She's not coming. I cannot come. You must not do that. He does not speak to me. Yes, the first four negative sentences, the first three negative sentences, they do not have this do. For example, I haven't, we see we have used the word have and then not. These structures, these syntactical structures were present in this period, and they say that I haven't eaten yet, that they have not. The not is used with have, and then she is not coming. She is not coming. Then this is the second negative sentence. Again, not is used with is without using any do. And the third sentence, that is I cannot come. Again, the auxiliary verbs is can. There are different auxiliary verbs that have been used in the first three sentences. The first sentence, it has have. The second sentence is, and the third is can. Have, is, and can. Then the fourth is you must not do that. You must not. Must not again is an auxiliary. Once when not has come with the must, there is again an auxiliary word, dummy word, that is do has been used. But in this sentence we can say that this is not a purely dummy word, rather it has been used to refer to some kind of action. It has been used as a verb in this sentence. In the fifth sentence, he does not speak to me. Does not speak to me. The word does not here is used simply as a dummy auxiliary verb because it has been introduced where perhaps it does not have any specific role in the sense of the verb, yet it has been used. So we can say it was a dummy auxiliary verb that was used, and these things have risen in this early modern English period in the English language. Yes, the do as dummy auxiliary verb, it was not only used in that thing in negatives, but also in some interrogative sentences there was also a use of do. As you have noticed that in our today's language, what we call the present indefinite tense, we used negatives, we use do, we use the word, these two words, do and does, to make negatives as well as interrogatives of the present indefinite tense, and we can say that these are the dummy auxiliaries that we use over there. Sometimes there was a rise of dummy auxiliaries do in the yes or no questions. For example, have you eaten lunch? Is she coming? Can I come in? May I speak to her? Does she speak English? This. For example, have you eaten lunch? This is only yes or no question, because we can answer this question only in yes or no. For example, have you eaten lunch? Yes. Is she coming? No. Can I come in? Yes. May I speak to her? No. Does she speak English? Yes. These are the words that can be answered on two ways, with a yes or no. And we had to look at the rise of the dummy auxiliaries, that is do or the does, that have that have come to a rise in this period of time. Okay. Then there is a rise in the auxiliaries in WH questions. For example, in WH questions are those questions that start with WH, that have WH in the start. For example, the words like what, when, where, what. These are the questions that start with WH. And WH questions, for example, in question number 1, what have you eaten? This is a WH question. When is she coming? Where can I sleep? Where must she do? What did she say? In the last two examples, the use of do and did is an emblem, is a representation, or the rise of dummy auxiliaries verb to. The rise of analytical verb forms was also there in that age. As it told you that today our main focus is on the morphosyntactical structures. The morphosyntactical structures is about the formation of the words and the formation of words that lead towards the grammatical structure of the sentences. The rise of analytical verb forms is, for example, future, present perfect and progressive. Future, present perfect and the progressive, these are the three actually verb forms that were present, and let's see that how they were rising and why are we calling it this is the rise of the analytical verb forms. Look at the future form of the verb. The future will have the words like will, example is will leave. Present perfect, have gone, have, auxiliary plus the third form of the verb. Then progressive, that shows the progression of something, that shows the continuity of something, and it is as auxiliary, and first form of the verb plus ing form. Yes, these were the things that have risen in this particular period of time. Yes, the rise of subject, verb and object was also there in this period of time. Though SVO, subject, verb, object, had become the dominant word order in the Middle English, it was yet not as rigid as in the modern English. Yes, because before this you remember that we have discussed that there were so many combinations that have come out of subject, verb and object. Sometimes it was obvious, sometimes there were so many combinations. Let me write down a few of them. Subject, verb and object only, sometimes subject or verb, sometimes object, verb or subject, sometimes object, subject and the verb. There were so many combinations, and perhaps it showed that there was the creativity, there was the perhaps something that was going on, something innovation was there. People used to innovate, people used to create and construct so many of the new sentences. Okay, for as we are saying, subject, verb and object, subject or verb, object, verb and subject. Sometimes object is in the start, sometimes another combination that was there perhaps in those that verb, subject and object, a totally opposite combination. Now what happened with the passage of time and the progress of decay in the language? Actually it was not yet as rigid as in the modern English language. It was not yet as rigid as in modern English language. This sentence shows that modern English, it is very, very rigid. It has got a set pattern, a set format, a set theoretical framework, and this theoretical framework does not allow any kind of creativity in this. It does not allow any kind of innovation. It does not allow something new, the new combinations. It has become so rigid. As we even that is let's say, as we are living in this modern period or the postmodern period, we know that we have to in any case follow subject, verb and object agreement. This is a sentence structure that we have to follow in anyhow. Yes, so this it was not so we can say perhaps previously it was more flexible, it let and it allowed as many entries as many possible, but these days it has become more rigid. It is not flexible anymore. It does not allow any of the new contribution. It has just stuck itself, it has confined itself to some restricted formulas. Yes, then the words like thou and you, as we have looked at Shakespeare's language, there is immense use of the word thou. Yes, of this word thou. We see that thou means you. Okay, let's look at different singular and the plural examples of these things, and let's see that how these things have changed in Old English and period, and then Middle English period, then in the early modern English period. In Old English period, there were some singular verbs, like for example, it was used for you. In plural it was ye. In Middle English it changed into thou, and it was more familiar. I would say thou to a person. If let's say if I am using Middle English and I would use this word thou in a situation that is more familiar one, only then I would use thou, and plural it would be ye. Okay. Ye is more polite, more courteous use of the word, whereas in early modern English period, it again changed its form and it became you. You as an object, ye, or in singular and in plural, both these words became ye. That is equal to you, and you as an object it was used, you. So that you can trace the change that has taken place from this period to this period. These are the two historical evolution of one word from Old English period to the Middle English, and then from moving from Middle English period to the early modern English period. Let's move on and let's look at possessive markers. Possessive markers, I would firstly let me explain that what these possessive markers are. All possessive markers are those words that we use to show the possessions of anything. For example, if I am saying this is my pen, let's say I would use the word my Rabia's pen. The phrase is Rabia's pen. Rabia, then apostrophe, and then S. This is a possessive marker, apostrophe S. Rabia's pen. In the same way, Ali's laptop. Ali, and then apostrophe, and then S, and then laptop. Laptop is a noun, and apostrophe S is a possessive marker, and it shows that Ali is the possessor of this laptop, or Rabia is the possessor of this pen. So these are the two possessive markers. The possessive markers are those pointers, are those words, those symbols that are used to refer to certain possession of a word. Peter, for example, look at this word Peters. Peters, and initially it was Peters and Peter his. It is equal to Peter his. This word, the word that is written in the bracket, this is a possessive marker. Peter his. Okay. John Brown his meadow. His meadow. His meadow. This is an object, and this is a possession of this person, John Brown. This is, we can say, this is an object. Anne Harris, her lot. Anne Harris, her lot. Anne Harris is the name of the person. Her lot. Lot is a possessive marker of Anne Harris. Possessive markers are those words that somebody possesses, are those qualities that shows the possession of something. Possessive clitic. Let's see what these are. Possessive clitics. The Queen of England's crown. Peter's car. Peter and Mary's car. Peter and Mary's car. Yes, look at these two examples. In the first pair of examples, we see the first sentence is the Queen's crown. Queen's crown. Queen's crown is written Queen, apostrophe, and S. This thing, the upper comma that come, it is known as apostrophe. And this apostrophe is mostly used to show the possession of something. It's a possessive marker in this example. The Queen's crown. Crown is the object, and Queen's crown. Crown is the object of queen, of that specific queen. Okay, the Queen's crown is the, actually we can say that the crown is in the possession of that queen. The possession marker, the possessive clitic that is used over here is the apostrophe S. Okay, the same example can be written in this way: the Queen of England's crown. Again, D and then apostrophe S in England's crown means the queen, that is the queen of a specific country, the queen who is a queen of some specific region. This is the crown of that queen, the Queens of England. Okay, the next example is Peter's car. Peter's car. Peter apostrophe S, and then car. Peter's car is actually is what is the possession, is the thing that Peter possesses. Okay, is it all right? Yes, car is the thing that Peter possesses. So Peter's car, what would be the possessive clitic? Is the apostrophe and the S. That is actually a kind of link. It's a kind of link between Peter and the car, Peter's car. Okay, Peter and Mary's car. The car is that of two people, Peter and Mary's car. It is a combination of them. Okay, relative pronoun. Relative pronouns are those pronouns that can be used, that can be used in the place of the nouns, that would refers to some kind of relation. Let's see that what these nouns are and how can they be written. For example, let's look at the example from A, B, C, D. A sentence is, the book that fell from the table. The second is, the book that I read. The book that I gave him. The book that I talked about. Yes, the book that fell from the table. The book. Relative pronouns are showing the relevance of some particular object with some particular thing. For example, the book, the is referring to some specific book. The book. Let me tell you one thing about this word, the. Yes, the, when this word the is used before a noun or a common noun, this common noun converts itself into the proper noun. And for example, it is actually to specify certain thing. Once when we say that the book means it's not a general or any book. The book means we are referring to one specific book. The specific book. That book, the book, okay? The book that we have in our mind. The converts, it transforms the common nouns into the proper nouns. Fine? Yes, the book that fell from the table. Now the rest of the sentence, the book, it's about that fell from the table. That fell, the book that fell. What is the relevant pronoun? That. That is referring to what? That fell. Okay, the book is actually felling, so it is a reference to that book. The book that fell from the table. I hope this is clear. Okay, next, now let's move on to the second one, and the second is the book that I read. The book that I read is that I read. The book again is not a general book, but it's rather some specified book, because we have used the determiner the before this word book. The book that I read. Which book? That. Again, that is referring to this thing. That book. Which one? That I read, that I have been reading. Okay. The next example, the book that I gave him. Again, the specific book, that, which book? I gave him, that I given it to somebody else, is referring to that specific book. The book that I talked about. That I talked about. Yes, again, where this that is referring, the whole of this chunk, the second part of the sentence is referring to the first part. I talked about was the same book about which it is written. Okay, so these are the functions of some relative pronouns that we will notice. in English language. There are some subject relatives as well. For example, look at example number A. It says, who's that knocks? Who's that knocks? Subject relatives that are referring, that are creating a relation between the subject. Who is that knocks? Knocks is referring to who? Who is that knocks? Who's knocking? Knocking is referring to the subject. Who is that person who is actually knocking? This is a relevance, a subject relative to that word. Okay, I have a brother. I have a brother is condemned to die. I have a brother is condemned to die. Yes, a line taken from Shakespeare's example, and it says, I have a brother is condemned. The brother is actually, I is a subject, have is verb, and I have what? A brother. So brother is an object. Now we are saying there are some subject relatives word as well, and these are, I have a brother is condemned to die. Is condemned to die who? The brother that I have. So it is complete, it is totally referring to the subject of the sentence. Yes, again there is in the next example, look, there was a farmer had a dog. There was a farmer, he had a dog. Yes, there used to be a farmer, there was what? A farmer. A farmer. Actually the subject is what? Subject is a farmer. And the farmer ke baad, there is a farmer had what? Had is what? A dog. It is referring to this whole of this clause, or this this thing is referring back to the same subject. There was a farmer, farmer had dog. Had a dog is a reference to the farmer. There was a ball of fire. There was a ball of fire. What did this ball do of fire? Shot up through the seats in front of me. It shot up. Actually the whole of this chunk, this underlined chunk, is a reference to one thing. What? That is the subject. In this sentence the subject is ball of fire. Okay, it's ball of fire. So the whole of the underlined clause, shot up through the seats in front of me, is a reference to the one word, that is ball of fire. Then in the next example, there is something keeps upsetting him. Something is being the subject, means the doer. Subject is actually the doer. There is something, and now what is this something doing? This something is keeps upsetting him. It's keeping him upset continuously. So this last part, keeps upsetting him, we can say it's a subject relative, and it is referring to there is something as a subject. Okay, there's a lot of people don't know him. There's lot of people don't know him. The whole of the phrase is referring to this thing. There's lot of people don't know him. So the examples have shown that there are some subject relatives as well, some subjects, and we need to create a connection between the main subject and the rest of the words. Which and who relatives. As a relative pronoun, which emerged in the 14th century. Which emerged in the 14th century. Which and who, these are the words that are used as sometimes to we can say these are the relative pronouns, and these are the relative pronouns that are used to combine two or three sentences. These are used to combine two or three clauses with each other. Whose and whom emerged in early modern English period, okay, which started in 14th century, and then the next two important words, whose and whom, they emerged in early modern English period. Later, who was formed by the analogy, okay, then later on another new word was formed. Accessibility hierarchy was there. There's subject, do, obligation, and generalization. It was also there in which and who clauses. Comparative forms of these adjectives. Yes, then again in this period another morphosyntactic change that has taken place was about the comparative forms of adjectives. For example, these were introduced and these came in fashion at that time. For example, in the first instance, we see that it's happy, happier, and happiest. These are the three comparative forms of adjectives. Actually, although we are looking at the forms, but we are looking at the forms of adjectives, and these are the three comparative forms, the three where the three words are comparing each other. One show one state, the other show perhaps a state that comes after that, and then the third that comes another comparative degree. Fine, and all these forms started in once again in the early modern English period. We are looking at the morphosyntactic structures today. That's why we are realizing that how these adjectives have started in that period. Next, look at the next example, that is the word difficult. More difficult, most difficult, these are the things that are the same up till now in our today's English as well. Let's look at some other lines that are taken from Shakespeare. For the first instance is taken from Shakespeare, and the first line is, in the calmest and the most stillest night. So the use of different forms is also found in Shakespeare's writing. His era was actually the era of Shakespeare, the period of Shakespeare was 1564 to 1616. This was the period, and at that time he is using these forms. He is using in the calmest, calm, and then the calmest, calm, calmer, and the calmest. Perhaps in that sense he is using the degree of adjective, the comparative form of the degree of adjective he is using. And the most stillest night, the is missing, so we can say the came later on in this period. And the most stillest night, stillest, again it is a degree of adjective that is used. Against the envy of less happier lands, against the envy of less happier, the use of the words less happier, these are referring to the adjectives of and its different comparative forms. While we have come up to this comparative forms of adjectives, I would want you to think of some of the more comparative forms of adjectives, and I want you to tell us that whether is there any difference that has taken place in these forms of adjectives or not yet. Actually, I would say perhaps that most of the forms that have emerged, that have come up to this level, they are almost the same. They are as in today's world we use the words like bad, worse, worst. We use good, better, best, and these are different words. And then Let's see that actually what point comes to my mind while I look at the examples of Shakespeare. I would say that he has although used this structure in his actually he has used this structure in his writing, but the thing is that in the look at the example, the first example, in the calmest and the most stillest night. Calmest and most stillest. The inventions were there, the new words were there, but perhaps they were not as same as we have today. Calm. Can you please remember the word calm and its different forms that are present at this age? Calm, more calm, most calm, or calm. There are different other forms are calm, calmer, or calmest. What these are? But for Shakespeare it is calmest. For Shakespeare it is stillest. This he has used this, and these forms he has used to perhaps shown the most extensive degree of that thing. Look at the meanings of the line that we are getting. We are not only looking at the words but also looking at the syntactical structures of language. So let's see that what are the meanings that we get from this line. In the calmest and the most stillest night, the use of these words show the intensity of the night that was prevailing at that time, and perhaps to show it in the most extensive manner, he has used the third form of the third comparative form of the adjective. And let's see in the next line what are the meanings of the words that have been used in the next line. Against the envy of less happier lands. Against the envy of less happier lands. The lands he is actually using, look how innovative he was, look how creative and the rule breaker he was. He has used the word against the envy of less happier lands. Do you think that lands can be happy? Is it possible for the lands to show its happiness, to show that they are glad, to show its amusement? Perhaps not. Against the envy of less happier lands, the lands are less happier. They were not as much happy as the others. Less, the word less is again, it refers to which degree? Less, less, least, lessen, and listening, lessening. What are the four degrees, comparative degrees of this adjective? Less, very less, or very less, less, least. Perhaps the second degree, the second comparative degree of this thing is the least, least and listening, the things like that. He is actually using where there is a comparison perhaps of between the two objects. The two objects against the envy of less happier lands. When there is a comparison of the two things that is going on, so he is saying that this land is less happier than the other. It's a comparative degree of adjective he has used in the 16th century, in 17th century. See how intellectual he was. Even at such an early stage of the history, he has used such an advanced level of the things. The rise of dummy auxiliaries do. Yes, now we are coming back to the rise of the dummy auxiliaries too. We have already discussed a bit of this dummy auxiliaries. and we have also looked at the examples, but I am coming back to this point because do has been the most confusing thing. Perhaps whenever we talk about sentences, it has been the most confusing part of the conversation up till now. When the students are asked to learn and to talk about the tenses, they are really very much worried, and they are always asked to start with the first by telling that there are the four tenses, or the tenses are the periods of time. When they talk about the tenses, and they say that there are the four main tenses. The first one is indefinite, continuous, perfect, and the perfect continuous. This is the same pattern that usually goes on in our society. But actually, you know, that even the students of master's level, even the students of the graduate level and the undergraduate level, all the students, they have been making the most enormous mistakes in the use of the word do. There have been mistakes, there have been so many mistakes in the word, in the use of this word do. They actually what are the mistakes that you usually do? As you know, that in our set pattern, in our set framework of grammar of English language, we have actually some rules and regulations to follow. In general rules regarding do, we say that if we choose the do and there are the two words, these are the do or does, these are the two words in in the simple sentences in present indefinite tense. Let's suppose the students would use s or es with the first form of the word, as the first form of the verb plus the addition of s or es would be done in the simple sentences. But the rule for the negative and for interrogative sentences is what? It is the rule that if we will use do or does to convert them into interrogatives or into negatives. But what is actually the thing? Do or does, when they would come after this, only the first form of verb would be used, and there will not be any use of s or es. Now what happens mostly, what I have noticed in my such a long experience with the students, I have been marking and checking the papers of the students. What they do, they would use the singular plural, for example he, she, it, etc., and they would forget, they won't add, they won't write in a correct and appropriate manner, they won't add s or es with the sentence. This is what the students usually do. And suppose if the students are using s or es with the sentence, what they would do actually, they would just write it down with the plurals. Although according to the set pattern of grammar in English, it is said that the students must not do this. They can add s or es only if the subject is singular, and they are not asked to add s or es when the subject is plural. Okay, the things vary according to the subjects. Now these things have led to the enormous mistakes of the students, and they perhaps they really need a lot of practice and a lot of struggle to do this, to make it correct. Sometimes these mistakes are really very conscious, and sometimes they are not conscious, they are done without knowing the things. Now we were saying that we are looking at the rise of the dummy auxiliaries, and the dummy auxiliary verb that we are discussing here is do again, and the examples that we have seen are say you so, and the second is I know not. Say you so. Do you think that this sentence, say you so, does it make a sense? Does it convey some meanings? Say you so. There's a question mark. So it means it is said in a way of asking some question. Say you so means, are you saying it this way? It means in the simple way. And the second is, I know not. Do you think that these are the two correct constructions of the sentences? Perhaps these are not the correct constructions of the sentences, because say you so would be correct according to our English, according to our set pattern of English. It would be correct only if we say, do you really say so? Do you? If we would add a dummy do, we'll put it in the first place, then we'll write down subject, then we'll write down verb, and then some other words, and the correct construction according to the set grammatical rule would be, do you say so? Okay. And the second is, I know not. I know not. Again, this is not acceptable. This is not syntactically or grammatically correct. Reason because again it needs an addition of a dummy word, dummy auxiliary word do, because the correct expression would be, I do not know. So you have seen how the word order is changing, how the sentence is changing just by the addition of the word do. Yes, it is making a great change in the language. And as we were talking right now about the early modern English period, and we are saying that these things were the same at that period, and now perhaps they have acquired a great change. Now they have become more rigid. The very first statement with which I started our lecture today, we said that it has become, the modern English has become more rigid. It is not flexible. It does not allow some new contributions, some new additions into it. Yes, why it does not allow some new additions into it? Because perhaps actually it does not, it has confined itself into that one particular framework. It does not allow the constructions and does not go beyond that. There are some examples of causative do. Causative, the word has been taken from cause, and cause means something, the reason, the logical reasoning. If you are talking about the reason of something, if you are going to give brief something in a rationalistic way, so do can also be used. For example, he did them build a castle. Good example. He did them build a castle. Did. He did them. He did them means there is a cause that is coming in. There is something hidden that is coming in this sentence. There is some hidden agent. There is some hidden power that is coming in this sentence. He did them build a castle. He did them build, he caused them build a castle. He did, the word, the second form of the verb did, it referring to this thing. He caused them. He was the agent who forced them to build that specific castle. Are you getting my point? I hope that you are getting it, that causative, while we talk about the causative do, while we talk about the relationship of cause and effects, while we say that one thing is, if one thing, this is the cause of something, it would be an effect of something. Okay, the cause and effect relationship. While we look at that, we say that causative do, for example, he did them build a castle. He did them, he he made them, he forced them, he was the agent, he was the reason behind the building of that specific castle. So these are the different rules, these are different formulations that are caused by the words do. You can see that how in many different structures it has been used in different places to mean different things. We cannot confine it, we cannot restrict it to one particular function of a language. We say that the things vary, we say that the things change. Yes, and then let's move on and hope that we have some other, the rise of the demi-auxiliary do, and then we'll be looking at some other examples. Again, the examples are taken from the literary text, from the literature and the literature of Shakespeare. You would be wondering that why I have used so much examples of Shakespeare. The reason only being that he was firstly regarded as the greatest person, the greatest dramatist, the greatest writer of the world, and the second is that he had given a numerous treasure of English language. He has added so many of the new words to the study of English language. That's why he has given new dimensions, he has given new innovations and the new things to the study of English language. And so we are again and again referring back to the examples that are given by Shakespeare. Shakespeare has used it, I doubt it not. Then Shakespeare say, I do not doubt you. Then Shakespeare say, why look you so upon me? Shakespeare once again say, why do you look on me? See what are the changes, what are the different things that you notice. These are the two pairs of examples that you find in that we found out here. I doubt it's not. Simply, it is directly said, I is the subject, doubt is the verb, and it is the object, and not the negative of the sentence is coming towards the end in his one style of writing. Whereas the same sentence was once again written, and it was written in quite closer to the pattern and the format of the new modern English that we are doing right now. I do not doubt you. I do not was used properly. Not is not towards the end. From the ending position, it has come to the starting position. It has come before the verb, and in a correct proper subject verb plus negative auxiliary dummy word do, and then the negative, and then the verb, main verb, and then you, that is the object. It has come there. I do not doubt you. Okay. Why look you so upon me? Why look you so upon me? Yes, the first sentence, it refers to why look you so upon me, means it's asking about the reasons. It does not have do, and perhaps we say in today's world that this is not the correct structure of the language as well. But when we come to the next line and we say, why did you look on me? Why, starting with the WH as quite close to the modern structure, then comes do, the dummy auxiliary verb to show interrogation, to interrogative sentence, then comes subject, then comes do is what? This is dummy auxiliary. Okay, you is coming as a subject, look is coming as a verb, on me, on me, on me is what? Is object coming in the sentence. So why do you look on me? These were the two more uses of do. With this, we come to the end of our today's lecture, and before we actually end, let me give you quickly one or two examples of these things, of more of the dummy auxiliary verbs, that how do they go. I do not can go. See, do you think that this example is correct or appropriate? I do not can go. I cannot go, perhaps. She does not may leave. Is Peter may go? A new construction. Some new constructions are there, and perhaps the use of do as well. Now lexical diffusion. Subject and verb, not subject, do not verb. Okay, verb 1, these were some things. For example, in this I know not, it has been changed into I do not know. I do not know. It is a lexical diffusion. Different lexical items have been diffused into the language. Okay, then this S-shaped development that has come actually into the language. It started the development, this is the time period that is going on the horizontal axis. Then the S-shaped development, the thing started, and they have come up to this level. They have risen so much. Firstly, there we see that the graph is a little straight, then it moves up, and then it is coming down once again. Perhaps there is now a stop at this age, and the things are being consistent, and before this it was continuously, it was rising and it was changing. A graph was totally changing. The psychological mechanism of language change is, what is this? Grammatical change involves the change of grammatical rules. Look, what was the writers have discussed some psychological mechanisms of the language change as well, and the hypothesis is what? That grammatical change involves the change of grammatical rules. It will definitely involve, means if there are the 3 rules, but the 4th rule is, it is definitely mathematically going to be equal to 7, no, not more than that. Okay, change of rules. For example, if there are some negatives, the subject, verb plus note. Subject would come, he, does, and not. This is subject, verb, not. Okay, if there is negative, subject, do not, and then the verb. He does not go to school. In the first example, I do not work. Then in this, he does not go to school. This is example of this negative rule. What motivated the development of the do pattern? In negative sentences, do reinforce the negative meanings of the sentence. Definitely, it is quite true. The do is referring to the negativity in the negative sentences. The development of do in the questions, it is referring to the question, what is she doing? Where can I find this book? Where did Peter see Mary? This is referring to the questions. Why auxiliary models were not involved in change? If the sentence includes a modal or auxiliary, there is a WH, auxiliary, subject, verb, object pattern even without do. Yes, even without do, sometimes the subject, verb, and object can get complete. Modals and auxiliaries are the most frequent verbs. Yes, these are the most frequent verbs. Frequently used linguistic structures are also deeply entrenched in the mental grammar that they do not change easily. They will not change easily, they will stay there. There were some new consonant phonemes that have been introduced. For example, the phonemes like P, B, T, D, R, K, G, Ch, J, F, V, T, D, S, Z, Sh, J, H, M, N, Ing, L, R, V, Y. These are different phonemes, and phonemes we have already discussed in detail, so I won't be going into details again. The silent consonant, compensatory lengthening was there. For example, in sight, sa, a, eat, sight. Sight, a, e, these are the two silent consonants. The one becomes more prominent and the other become less prominent, so it becomes sight. Then the next is half, palm, fork and talk. These are different words that have the examples of silent consonants. Then castle, hasten, wrestle, handsome. No, knife, knee, night, no. And all these things, these words are quite silent. These are known as silent consonants that are not pronounced in speech. And for example, castle, sull, it becomes sull. Hasten, wrestle, handsome, handsome. The is the silent consonant in it. Okay, some silent consonants that are more here: wrong, wrinkle and wrist. Okay, in British and American, for example, it's in British language the word is car, and in American it's car. The difference between American and British English is that Americans would always pronounce r sound. That comes towards the end. It becomes car, with the tip of tongue towards the end. Whereas in Britisher, they would pronounce it car. Then in British English, this is the word that is known as beer. Beer. They are not going to pronounce the last r sound. Whereas in American, it's beer, where you would pronounce r. Spelling pronunciations also change. For example, anthem, throne, orthography, author, habit, tactic, history, horror, human. These are some spelling pronunciations that were there in that period. Then some respelling based on the Latin source. Some French loans were like fort, assault, fecund, what, and they were respelled as this way: fault, assault, falcon and what. They were based on they were actually the French loans, and then they were respelled based on that source. We are going to end our today's lecture over here, and with this, actually I'll be giving you firstly a quick recapitulation of what we have done today. And actually we started our lecture by discussing the morphosyntactic changes of the that have taken place in the early modern English period. Morphosyntactic changes, both these things were related to the words and the grammatical structure of the language. Then we have also looked at some inversions in the language, the rise of dummy auxiliaries we have seen. We have looked at some analytical verb forms and the possessive forms. We have looked in detail at the relative pronouns. Then we have looked at lexical diffusion, how different lexical items, how different words have diffused and then they have made some new words. We have looked at some new consonant phonemes. We have also looked at some spelling pronunciation. So it was a detailed recapitulation of what we have done today in our today's lecture. Hope you enjoyed today's lecture, and I hope that you will keep studying the things up till the next lecture. So take very good care of yourself. We'll see you again in the next lecture. Till then, take good care and Allah Hafiz.